TPS is at 0%, which it should be. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Today's going to be a pretty big day because I think we're going to try to fire this car up today. Before I do that, I want to show you how easy it is to actually set up and hook up your Holley Terminator X Max system. I'm not a wiring guy. I enjoy doing it if I know where the wires are going. I'm kind of one of those OCD guys that likes to make wires look clean, but I'm not real great at figuring out how things function electronically sometimes. And so if I can do it, I promise you, you can. So I think what I'm going to do is very quickly kind of take you through the awesome booklet that Holley provides, show you where everything hooks up on the engine harness side, and then show you where everything hooks up kind of on the other side of the firewall and directly to the battery and where power sources and grounds and things like that are. So here we go. After I get done explaining all that, I'm legitimately going to try to fire this thing up. This is not TV magic. This is not me firing it up for the 5th time, making it look like it's the first. I have a fire extinguisher over here standing by just in case, because I have wires just strung out all over the place, across the floor, across the top of the car, just temporarily hot wired in just to make this happen so that I know it works. And oh, by the way, there is no other wiring in this car. I took out the entire car bulkhead harness, so the only wiring in this car is literally the Terminator X Max system. So it's pretty cool that you can do that. It means I had to hotwire a couple things because I don't even have a steering column in here, so getting switched cranking power was a little difficult, but I'll show you how I did it. Here we go. Okay, as far as installation goes, the first thing to talk about doing is the main battery power connection itself. That's a separate harness. It just has basically a fused connection for the red power. For the red power source, and just a red and black wire that go directly to the battery itself. And since I moved the battery to the back of the car, this is that harness right here that just kind of strings through the car right now. Obviously, I'll clean that up later, but that's it. One red battery, one black one. They tell you to go directly to the battery. Don't even put it through switched power. I have a disconnect harness here. They say not to put it on this, put it directly to the battery itself, and that's what I did. Next thing to talk about is the primary harness installation and sensor connections. That's the main harness that's right here in the engine bay itself. Pretty simple. There's a couple variants among Gen 3, Gen 4 motors that I'll talk about, but this harness was specifically made for a Gen 3 motor with a 24 reluctor wheel, with the cam sensor in the back and the NOx sensors underneath the intake. Things that are specific to this early Gen 3 LS. This is a 98 F body, all aluminum LS1, by the way, for those wondering. And it's stock. So very quickly, I'll show you the connections. They literally only plug in one place. That's what makes this so great. I guess before I show you where everything connects, the one thing I wanted to show you was that the ECU connectors themselves, this main engine harness has 2 big connectors on it that go into ports J1A and J1B. No matter if you have a Terminator X or Terminator X Max, obviously there's more connections for a Max because it's got the transmission controller as well as a drive-by-wire. First thing to hook up is the oil pressure sensor. Ironically, they talk about it in the book, and that is if you have an F-body oil pressure sensor, which is what that is right there, this harness won't hook up to that. You've got to buy a separate pressure transducer that will hook into that. I don't have that at the moment. It's actually on its way, but it's an optional sensor anyway, so it's not going to keep me from firing this today. Coolant temperature sensor. Easy enough, right there on the side of the driver's head. Next thing is the O2 sensor. The cable that comes on the harness is pretty long, and because it was so long, I wanted to hook it up over here on the passenger side because I currently have 2 O2 sensors in here, but the Holley Terminator system only needs 1, and they're very specific. You've got to use their O2 sensor that comes with the kit, but because I could not get that sensor out over there because it's jammed up against the firewall, I'd have to take the entire exhaust system off to get it. I ended up having to install it over here on the driver's side. No big deal. Plugs right in. Okay, here's something else that comes with the kit that's optional, and I have the pressure transducer coming. but that's for a fuel pressure sensor. I'm going to hook that up. It's the same part number, actually, part number 554102 that you would use for the oil pressure sensor back there. I've got to get a T-fitting for our -6 AN lines so that I can hook this thing up. But since it's optional, it's not, again, it's not going to keep me from firing this thing up today. Okay, next is the manifold air temperature, the MAP sensor. That's what this is right here. This is a sensor that I already had in the car. This is the plug-in for it. The problem is it plugs in clear over here. We were originally, when we had the other harness, we were going to put it like in the bend right here, but it gets so hot under here, we thought this thing would flex too much, it would probably come out. So we decided to hook it further down, which means at some point I'm going to have to extend this, depin this and extend this cable to run underneath here. No big deal. Again, this is not going to keep me from firing this today, but that's how we have ours hooked up. All right, next is the cam sensor. Again, since this is a Gen 3 LS, cam sensor is on the very back. All the way on the back of the manifold, and if you can see all the way down there past the oil pressure sensor, you see the little red wire down there, it's all the way there on the back. Next is the crank sensor. Has heat shield. You can see the heat shield over right there. It runs all the way down the passenger side. Goes all the way down to the starter down there. It's almost impossible to see, but it plugs in on the passenger side of the block just above the starter right there. Something else that was optional, because a lot of the newer, I think Gen 4 LSs, I believe, don't have knock sensors, but we've got an early style Gen 3 and they are on there. So there is a knock sensor plug-in. All the way on the back, there's actually a pigtail that runs all the way underneath the intake to give you an extension plug into it. That's what this is right here. Just plug into the pigtail, you're good to go. Next is your manifold absolute pressure sensor, your MAP sensor, and that's all the way on the back of the manifold itself. Makes sense. That's that big one right there, not up top. That's probably the easiest one to reach back here. There's several sensors hidden back there behind the intake, but the MAP sensor is luckily the easiest one to get to. Speaking of easy sensors to get to, there's the TPS, throttle position sensor right there up front, and the idle air control, the IAC, which is just above it right here on the throttle body. Next is the all-important fuel injector kit. This actually does not come with the Terminator X kit because GM actually made 3 different types of injectors that came with the LSs. There's the EV1, there's the EV6, and I forget what the third one is. It's some other weird name. Since this is the early Gen 3 LS1, it comes with the Bosch EV1 style injectors. So this plugs in at the very back here, and obviously just plugs in odd side, even side. Every wire is labeled. Right here on the end, you can tell that's injector number 2. Black wire there. Injector number 4. They really make it impossible for you to mess up. So you'll have to talk to Holley and make sure you get the right style injector harness to come with it, but it plugs in, it's universal at the very back there. Okay, ignition coils, even side and odd side. They just plug in right there. Odd side obviously for the drivers, even side for the passenger. Too easy. All right, this seems like an insignificant thing to talk about, but I actually wanted to tell you how important it is to have good grounds on the back. This kit comes with 2 grounds that are spaced out so that you can plug them, or actually bolt them, directly into the back of each head. So there's open ports or open bolt holes back there. Make sure they're tight. You will easily burn up the system if you don't actually have good grounds on this, so make sure those are back there. The holes themselves are kind of shallow, so make sure you've got a short bolt as well. Some people have bolted it in, the bolt snugged down, thought the ground was tight, found out otherwise later on, and burned up an ECU. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. Make sure you got good grounds. All right, now we're on the inside of the car. We're getting to the fun stuff now, guys. We're actually on the handheld connection itself, which is the screen that they give you, the little handheld screen. It comes with this little cool slide that you can slide over to protect if you want to. And the connector for that is just literally just a couple inches down the harness, plugs in right here, and you got quite a long cable here to extend it out to wherever you want, whether you're holding it in your hand or you mount it on the dash itself. So that's an easy thing to plug in right there. All right, now we're to the part where a lot of people get confused on. So this is where a lot of the loose wires come in on the main harness that you've got to connect that don't have their own plug-ins and aren't as easy to figure out. So the very first one here is the required 12-volt switched wire. It's a red and white wire right here. Just comes right off, right outside the harness right there. That's for switched cranking power. So if you had a steering column and normal wiring in the car, it's usually for a GM car, it's going to be the pink wire coming directly off the steering column. That's your switched cranking power, because it's got to be there both when the car is on and also while you're cranking it. So in my case, I've got it hooked directly to the battery, which is fine. Since I don't have an actual wiring harness on the car, I extended it back here all the way back to the closest thing I have to switch cranking power, which is the cutoff switch itself. So while the car is off, or I turn this thing off, it's going to cut power to that. Next thing is the actual red 12-volt battery source itself. Up there you see 3 loose wires, a red, a blue, and a green. I'll explain to the 2 wires later, but that red loose wire right there needs to go directly to the battery itself. And I've just got it extended to the car directly to the battery right here. Okay, this next one actually is optional, but I'm going to use it anyway because I have just a stock fuel pump in tank, a stock GM fuel pump that doesn't require any more than 15 amps, which is what Holley tells you. If it requires over that, don't use this wire directly to the pump, but we're good. So that optional green wire I showed you earlier that came out of there, it's in that same loose wire configuration that comes out of the side of the harness there. Again, since I don't have an actual wiring harness on the car, I've got it extended all the way through the car here, all the way down to the fuel tank. It's not even connected to the car at the moment because we have to do some welding and suspension work later, so I've got it removed. But you can see it goes directly to the purple wire that powers the in-tank pump. That third loose wire that's coming out of that harness, by the way, right here, the blue and with white stripe, is your optional tack signal, which I don't need today to start this thing, but just so you know what it is, that's what you would hook to the back of your tack. All right, obviously you want good chassis grounds. There is a main coming out of the harness itself here, right next to the switched cranking power red wire is a good black wire as well. I just have it grounded very well to the bottom of the firewall, inside of the firewall right there. And I didn't mention it earlier, but the fuel pump down here has a ground that goes directly to the chassis as well. Okay, a couple little minor things I haven't talked about yet. One is this optional wiring harness that plugs in. It actually, this harness right here is a separate one that plugs into that comes out of the back of the harness. That's actually for accessories. It has 4 inputs and 4 outputs. What I'm going to actually be using it for is that output 1 and output 2 are for I can use for the 2 electric fans. I've got 2 SPAL fans hooked up front, and I will use that to individually control each one. I may have one come on at maybe 160. I may have a second one come on at like 200 or something like that. That's something you can program right here through the handheld connector right here. So that's pretty cool. So I will be using a couple of these wires for that. The rest of them are just kind of optional at this point. And then lastly, there is a vacuum connection that needs to go to the back of the ECU here. It has 3 different size nipples that you screw on here. That's that clear part you see. And then there's a vacuum line. Goes up through the firewall, on through the car here, across the top of the intake, and right up to the front of my, pretty close to my throttle body right up here. That was a good vacuum source for that. So don't mind the messing wiring. All of this is just temporarily hooked up to see if I can get the car fired up. So yeah, there's loose stuff everywhere. But I think I've done a good job of explaining exactly where everything goes. And as soon as I fire this thing up and I know it works, then I'll go back and I'll clean everything up. Okay, there is one last thing I forgot to talk about. Some of you are probably wondering about, well, where's the transmission controller? Well, here's why I didn't talk about it. Here is the transmission controller that comes in the box itself. The reason I didn't talk about it is because we still have the stock Turbo 350 3-speed in here. We don't have the 4L60E installed in the car yet. That is something that we have. We just haven't had time to install it. It's something that we'll probably do later this fall, right before drag week. So when we get that transmission installed, I'll go over the setup and the plug-in of this harness, and I'll educate you guys then. All right, the last thing I need to talk about is that Holley recommends that you don't hook up the main power harness right here to the ECU until all the other connections have been made, and that's what I'm gonna finally do right now. All right, I couldn't do it one-handed, so I did it off camera, but there you go, plugged in. Here we go. All right, here goes nothing. I'm gonna try to do the initial setup on the handheld. And basically this is my switched cranking power right here. So I'm going to turn this on now. Hope that I don't smell any, breathe it in, make sure nothing's burning, no short of that wires. Once I verify that's all good, then we'll start going through the setup of this here. We'll do it together. Oh boy, here we go. Oh, cool. All right, I'm literally seeing this for the first time with you guys. Perform a TPS auto set before startup. Okay, that's right. Throttle position sensor setup. You gotta basically hit your gas pedal. So hit OK. Oh boy, here we go, guys. We're gonna do the initial setup using the handheld here on the Terminator X Max system, you've got to go into your wizards. And I'm not kidding, this is literally the first time. You go into your GCF wizard and select injection type. It's MPFI, multi-port fuel injection. Oh, I guess it's, yeah, hit that and hit next, I guess, yep. Select system type, GMLS, next. Number of cylinders, 8, too easy. Firing order, which is GMLS. LT, there's only one firing order, so only selection you get. Hit next. Cubic inches. This is, I see. This is where you want to go metric or imperial. I'm going to go imperial because America. And I get a slide bar, it looks like, for cubic inches. Oh, yeah, cool. So, oh, whoops. You know what? This is a 347 technically. I have to double check that. Hang on, I'll be right back. You know what? I changed my mind. I decided the easiest way to do this would be to go back and hit metric and then hit next. And then boom, I know I have a 5.7 liter because it is an all aluminum LS1. I have a 98 F body. Boom, next. Target idle speed. To be honest, I'm going to go about 800 for idle speed. And start there, see how that works. Keypad editor, I'm not sure what I did there. 800, hit next. Okay, yeah, I must have accidentally hit something. All right, camshaft specs. I know that there's some mild cams and hotter cams you can put in here, but this is a stock LS1 cam. So anything below 235 degrees duration, which I know the stock LS1 cam is like, I think 198 intake and 209 exhaust. So we're well below 235. So just leave the stock, or I'm sorry, just leave the default selection there, hit next. We're at 24 tooth reluctor, so that's easy. Next. Fuel pressure. Good question. I believe, well, I'll have to double check that. Hang on. Okay, I thought about it a little bit, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to guess it's only 43 PSI. I have what a lot of people who do LS swaps commonly use, and that is the Corvette style fuel filter / regulator that also sends a return line back to the pump. And I'm pretty certain that thing is pretty low PSI. So we'll start with 43 for now, and if we need to change it later, we can. Injectors, Holley. Oh, injectors. No, I'm sorry. OEM. And I'll hit it again here. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Part number for my LS1 injectors. All right, had to look them up here. Scroll down. The problem with an early Gen 3 LS1 is there's like 6 or 7 different part numbers for injectors. Huh. And I don't see any of them on here, actually. That's interesting. Wow. It's the actual injector part number is 1255427 and that is not one of my choices. Interesting. Well, I'll have to come back to this in a second. Okay, did a little research. I'm going to have to figure out how to go back in later and enter the correct part number via the Terminator X software later. But for now, I found that a compatible one is this 253-17628. So I'm going to choose that for now and move on. All right, power adder, none. Next. Map sensor. All right, had to look into it. In my case, it's going to be the internal 1 bar. So select that. Moving on. Drive-by-wire. No, that one's easy. IAC type, GMLSX. Yep. Transmission control. In this case, I'm going to tell it no because I don't have the 4L60E installed in the car yet, and my transmission control harness is not hooked up. So no for now. And start. Oh, check that out. Please cycle the ignition to complete the operation. Okay. To cycle it, all I got to do is hit this battery disconnect in my trunk here. So hit finish. Turn the battery off. Turn it back on. All right, now I got to do the TPS auto set before startup. So let's go do that. Wizards, TPS offset. Make sure the ignition is on and the engine is not started. That is where we're at. All right, here we go. Make sure the ignition is on and engine is not started. Start. Slowly press pedal to the floor, then slowly release. Do this twice. All right, I'm gonna run up front real quick and do that. All right, I did that twice. Next, TPS auto set was successful and done. Wow, that's it. That's literally all it is. Okay, very cool. Not too bad. Just a couple things that varied just a little bit from the instructions, but easy to research. And the cool thing is you can always go back and change it again later because this thing is infinitely configurable. All right. This is the part you all been waiting for, and the part that I've been most scared of. I think I've got it wired right. If you see, there's a extra battery ground I put directly from the relocated battery. I could only stretch it as far as like the transmission housing itself. I couldn't get it all the way up to the engine to provide an engine ground, but the transmission's hooked to the engine, so I'm hoping that that's enough of a ground that this thing will fire up. Because the only other grounds I have are the battery itself to the chassis down below the car, and then just the grounds that come directly with the Terminator X itself. So I hope this is enough. Here we go. This is my jump from the S terminal starter. Doesn't work. All right, let me check all my grounds. Find out what's going on here. Some days I just feel like an idiot. Anyway, found my problem. There's my jumper wire. And that's a problem. There's the other end of it. That was connected. I just, I think I tripped over it one time and I didn't realize that I had pulled this apart. So let me get these two back together and then let's try to start the car again. Okay, here we go again. Oh, I'm nervous. I'm seriously nervous. My fire extinguisher is expired too, so there's that. All right, watching my turn my monitor on here. Initial startup. TPS is at 0%, which it should be. Here we go. I don't hear the fuel pump running. I'm gonna have to check that. Try again. Okay, let me check my wiring. I've done something wrong. Hey, but at least it turned over. Yay! All right, mistakes were made. I plugged into the purple wire. That is the fuel sensor. itself for the gauge. Duh. I got the black wire right. It's the ground, but the gray wire is the actual power for the pump itself. I plugged into the wrong one. I also should have known, because you can tell, it's hard to see on the camera, but you can tell this is a thicker gauge wire too than the sensor and whatever this extra wire is here. I forget. I honestly don't remember what that is. It might be an unused one, to be honest. But anyway, gray is power, black is ground. This is my fuel pump sensor. Plugged into the wrong one. Let me fix that now, and then we will try again. All right, rewired. I've currently got the quick disconnect turned off. The fuel pump only gets a couple seconds of power, so I've got it plugged into where the gray terminal is here. Let me put my ground on here. As soon as I turn it on, we should see voltage. Yes, and I can hear it running too. That's awesome. And then it turns itself off just so we can start it. So, all right, good to go. Let's try to start this bad boy. All right. Here we go. Switch on. Jumper for the starter. Oh, yes! Yes! Oh, yes! Woo! All right, let's check our readout here. RPM just over 1,000. That's a little high. Map sensor 40 kPa. Initial timing 12. Oh, this is so awesome. Initial startup. Well, that's what I'm at anyway. That was the gauges. Woo-hoo-hoo! Oh, that feels so good. All right, I'm gonna let it warm up a little bit. I'm gonna keep an eye on it. If I see any problems, I'll turn it back off. But for now, I just want to see what all the settings are, how it runs, and just get used to this handheld monitor to see what it's telling me. I've never done this before. Okay. Not bad. TPS is at 0, obviously, because I haven't hit the gas. Voltage is good. Fuel. Closed loop compensation. I don't actually know. I mean, I know what the air fuel ratio is, but I have to figure out what the rest of some of that is. Closed loop. It's in closed loop. That's good. All right, that's going to be it for this episode. I really wanted to just show you how simple it was and easy it was to hook up with the Holley Terminator X Max kit. For a guy like me who's not really a wiring guy, I like to clean stuff up and make it look nice, but when it comes to diagnosing things, that's not really my forte. And Holley really did make it easy. There's only so many places you can plug in the sensors. When you study the difference between a Gen 3 and a Gen 4 LS, once you understand where the cam sensor is and the NOx sensors, for a Gen 3 versus Gen 4, you realize there's not that much difference between the two. And then when it comes to the actual wires to power it up itself, and then the initial setup using the handheld remote, the only thing, again, you saw how honest I was with the install of this. There was only a couple things that I really ran into trouble with that had to do with the Holley setup itself, and that was that it was asking me what fuel pressure I needed, and that was not in the instructions for some reason. Maybe that's a software update that you just haven't put into the documentation yet. No big deal. I started out using the lower setting of 43 pounds for now. If I need to make a change later, I can, because I can literally do it on the fly. And the other was that for some reason the part numbers for the fuel injectors that I have for this 98 LS1 were not in there. There are 6 part numbers for the old Bosch EV1 style fuel injectors for a 1998 F-body LS1. And they weren't in there. However, there's a cross-reference number, and I picked one that actually worked just fine. I don't really blame Holley for that, because this is like the oldest, one of the oldest LSs you can get. LSs came out in 97, and this is a 98, the very first year they even came out in the F-body. So again, you can change it on the fly if you decide it's not running the way you want to as well. And that's the great thing about this. I don't have to go in there and use HP tuners to crack into the old ECM and then make changes. I can literally do it on the fly as I'm in the car driving it. So I'm going to end the episode here for now so that I have time to kind of get all the wiring buttoned up. And then later I'll take it for a test drive so that it can actually go into learning mode. I couldn't do that for you in this episode because I just have all the rest of the car to still wire up using a painless wiring kit. So I'm not really ready to hit the road just yet. So thanks for watching, guys. We always appreciate you. And I hope this actually taught you something or you learned something from it. If anything, learn from my mistakes, because as you can see, I make them. And I was forthright with you guys, and you saw the mistakes I made with the jumper wire and the fuel pump and who knows what else. I even forget at this point. There's probably a few more. So take care, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you.